the market that is probably the most common market out there that people really talk about the least is what we call monopolistic competition or monopolistically competitive firms. We call it monopolistic because the firms have some control over price, and we call it competition because there's a lot of firms in the market. So it's got a little bit of monopoly and a little bit of perfect competition, so we call it monopolistic competition, and we call the firms monopolistically competitive. Okay, and there are a few sort of attributes and details that are associated with these firms and these markets, and then we'll talk about some examples of them. Okay, so we know that there are four types of firms: perfect competition. We know monopolistically competitive. We're going to learn about oligopolies and monopolies. Okay, so let's look at this one. These firms have very similar goods, but they're not exactly the same. Okay, so think of Subway and Jimmy John's and Quiznos are all similar, but they're not the exact same thing, right? So that might be an example of a monopolistically competitive, sub sandwich market, right? You have 4 or 5 of those type of restaurants. They all are relatively similar. Their prices are a little bit different, but they're not too far away. And that's another attribute, right? Another distinction. The prices are similar, but there is some difference. So another example, between pizzas, right? So you have Domino's and Papa John's and Pizza Hut and Little Caesars and Donato's and whatever else is around you, and their prices, they're not the same at all. Pizza Hut might be more expensive than Little Caesars, and there probably some quality difference there, but it's not radically different, right? Like if someone comes from outer space and lands in America and has a bite of Papa John's and a bite of Little Caesars, they're going to think they're relatively similar. And they're not going to be like, these are wildly different products. And so you have similar goods, similar prices, and those similarities tend to make these firms fiercely competitive. You see lots of advertisements between these firms trying to distinguish themselves to consumers, right? And you tend to get lots of firms trying to establish brand loyalty. So you'll keep coming back to their firm over and over and over. You see that with gas stations, right? Yeah, like Speedy cards and Shell cards and things like that. You tend to get it with fast food restaurants, Hardee's and McDonald's and stuff. When movies come out, they'll have little gadgets to go along with movies, and each when Star Wars comes out, McDonald's might try to get Star Wars action figures. They're trying to get you to have some brand loyalty. They want you to keep coming back, right? One of the things that McDonald's did that was so smart, was so many years ago, was it established Happy Meals, right? They're for kids, and it makes parents happy because the kids can go and be happy. What it also does is it establishes these kids are eating McDonald's when they're teeny tiny. They're going to grow up with McDonald's. They're going to keep asking for McDonald's, right? That brand loyalty, building that in is really important. And so, but since these firms are so fierce, they have to do what they can to get an advantage. There's a ton of examples. In fact, most markets are monopolistically competitive. Most markets, firms do have a little bit of price control. There are some differences in prices because there's probably some differences in quality. The toilet paper market, there's 10 or 15 types of toilet paper. They're, Charmin's more expensive than other stuff, but very similar stuff, right? There's a million different types of cereals, a bunch of different types of fast food restaurants. Now, is Subway and McDonald's the same? Are they the same thing? No, but they're kind of substitutes because all of us have been out to eat and we're like, well, you want to go to Subway? No, it's busy. We'll go to, Wendy's. My son randomly loves Wendy's, by the way, better than Malone Steakhouse and stuff. So those are substitutes, right? So just because they're not making the exact same thing doesn't mean that they're not substitutes, right? Hamburgers and hot dogs are different, but they're substitutes, right? Hardee's are Burger King and Quiznos might be substitutes, right? Chick-fil-A, there's no substitute for Chick-fil-A. It's the greatest. But other things might be substitutes, right? Um, Even in the fast food chicken market, you got, for a long time you just had KFC, but now you got KFC and you have Lee's Family Chicken and you've got Popeye's Chicken and you've got Zaxby's and you've got Cane's and you've got Chick-fil-A. Those are six right off the top of my head, just fast food chicken places, right? These are all examples of monopolistically competitive. Well, what does Chick-fil-A do? Chick-fil-A is more expensive than those places. But why do we keep going there? Well, the service is insane. It's really good service, right? And the people are super nice, and that's part of it too. So that's how they're distinguishing themselves amongst their competition, and it's working. Whether you like Chick-fil-A as a company or not, it is working. They also advertise like crazy. Chick-fil-A's advertisements are really funny, right? And they're all over the place. And these are all examples of how monopolistically competitive firms behave. They have very similar products, relatively similar prices, and they try to distinguish themselves. Again, they're not the same thing, but they're close. So that's why they're sort of called monopolistic and competitive, because they have some of the same distinguishing features of each one of those markets within their own. And again, this is what most goods and services is in the monopolistic competitive market.